Hi everybody, my name is Addison Hyam. I'm a software engineer here at StreamNative, and I'm here to talk to you today about StreamNative Cloud, which is our newly launched, fully managed Apache Pulsar offering. StreamNative Cloud allows you to create a cluster in your preferred cloud environment, and then to use that cluster as you would any normal Apache Pulsar instance. And today I just wanted to go a little through that process a little bit of how to get started with StreamNative Cloud. So first things first, we're going to just log into the StreamNative console. Clicking the login button is going to allow us to log in either with Google or with a username and password, whichever you prefer. And then when we first log into the console, we're going to be prompted here to create an organization. An organization, StreamNative Cloud, is a unit which is used for containing your clusters and also to allow other team members to be invited and to manage your cluster. Creating an organization does have a few constraints on it. Primarily, these are actually globally unique names and also are going to be used as part of the DNS name to name your clusters. So it's preferably something we want to keep short and identifiable. So for now, let's just call it Acme Inc. This process just takes 1 second, and here we're actually creating DNS zones, things associated with that. And from there, now we're ready to create a Pulsar instance. A Pulsar instance, currently you can only create one Pulsar cluster within a Pulsar instance, but in the future, as we launch features like geo-replication, you'll be able to have multiple clusters in the instance, and then you could have a Pulsar instance that actually spans multiple geographic regions. But getting started with this instance today, we're going to just give our instance a name. This often might include something like the environment or maybe some purpose. So we're going to call this just prod, our prod instance. Today we currently only support Google Cloud, but more providers will be coming in the future. And let us know which ones you'd like now. Additionally, there's a cluster type. Currently, we only have a standard cluster, and in the future, you may expect something like a basic cluster, which will be shared, maybe better for development purposes, and eventually things like shared clusters and dedicated clusters. We also have the choice of availability zones. Single AZ cluster is really cost efficient for production, and still good for production workloads, but it does have a little less availabilities compared to a multi-AZ cluster, which can withstand an entire AZ outage of the underlying cloud provider. Today we're going to go with just a single AZ cluster. One thing to note here, the choice of single AZ and multi-AZ cluster mostly just has impact on your write costs. Here we're going to enter a credit card number, my very secure real credit card number here. And in the future, we'll have a free plan that will allow you to get started without a cluster. We'll just take 1 minute here to create our Pulsar instance. All right, so now we're ready to proceed with creating our Pulsar cluster. So once again, the cluster name is something that we're going to want to be a little bit careful in naming, as it is actually part of the DNS name. And we're going to create this cluster in part of the East 4 region of Google Cloud. So we're going to call this Cluster 1 East 1. As I mentioned, we're going to, East 4. Let me go back and we'll change this to be East 4. And then now if you're familiar with Pulsar, you're probably familiar with it, that there's two main components in Pulsar, bookies and brokers. We let you tune how you want to create your cluster. So if you need a lot of storage capacity, but very little throughput at once, you can maybe use a much larger cluster that allows for a lot longer retention, and then size your bookie or your brokers accordingly. For now, we're just going to get started with kind of a small cluster. This cluster is still suitable for production purposes, but just doesn't have a ton of capacity. Likewise, we can also tune our broker here, choose what makes most sense. And in both these cases, as we go through and look at the choices we have, we can see roughly how much capacity you should expect to be able to get this cluster. And so if you know roughly what your read and write needs are, you can use this UI to help you create a cluster. But we're just once again going to create sort of the minimum default here. And then from there, we're now going to create a cluster. This process can take 5 to 10 minutes. And so while we wait and go through some of that process, I just wanted to take a minute to kind of walk you through some of the options you have for getting some support and help from StreamNative Cloud. So first off, this menu here can give you some idea of how you can get some support as well as our documentation. Our documentation, this contains a good reference of what all these things exist in the StreamNative API, as well as some other guides and FAQs that may be useful for you. Additionally, you can contact us, which will just send us an email, or you can send us feedback that we can also receive directly about StreamNative Cloud. And finally, they have one last way to get in contact with us. If we go to this small little widget down here in the bottom, you can click and you can always chat with us here. We tend to be on this during daytime hours on the West Coast, and feel free to live chat with us there if that's helpful for you. And as we get started here, I just want to talk a little bit through about what's happening. So as mentioned, StreamNative Cloud is a fully managed cluster and provisioned on underlying cloud providers. So at the moment, we're spinning up Zookeeper, Bookkeeper, Broker, and Proxy nodes that are all being created according to your specifications. As mentioned, these take a few minutes, and so I'll just pause this for a second and get back once we're ready to work with this cluster. As you can see here, we're already finished provisioning our Zookeeper, Broker, and Proxy nodes, and our Bookkeeper nodes are just finishing up. As mentioned, this process can take anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes, and we've just finished here, and now we're ready to continue on with getting connected to our cluster. As you can see here in this message, now we need to create a service account. A service account is an identity and a set of credentials that we can use to authenticate against our Pulsar cluster. So we'll get created by creating a service account, and we'll just call this the My App service account. And as you can see here, this will take just 1 second as we finish creating this service account. Now that we've created our service account, we can download the key file for that service account, which we can use later to connect to our cluster. But before we do that, we need to authorize our service account. A newly created service account doesn't have any permissions. We could authenticate with it, but we wouldn't be able to actually do anything. So before we connect and send our first message, we're going to authorize this service account. So we're going to visit this tenants menu here, and then go to our public tenant, which is by default created on all clusters. And then under their namespaces, we'll visit our default namespace. From there, we're going to be able to add a role. And when we click this Add Role button, it's going to give us our list of all of our service accounts. And in this case, this is the service account we just created. And from there, we're going to give this the produce permission, as well as we'll also give this the consume permission. Now that we've authorized our service account, we're ready to connect to our cluster and send our first message. To do that, I'm going to click the Clients tab here, and this UI simply has some commands that we can use to interact with our cluster already filled in with some of the information about our cluster. We're going to send a test message with the Pulsar client, so I'll simply click here and copy this, and we'll swap over to our terminal, where I've already copied my key file that we downloaded earlier, and I've also taken that small script and simply replace the private key with the path to my key, and we'll just run that command and send our message. This just takes 1 second to connect to the cluster, but we can see here that we were able to produce one message successfully onto our topic. From here, you'll be able to use the same UI to use lots of different commands, such as if you want to use Pulsar control, or connect with any other number of clients where we'll give you instructions on how to do that. And that's everything we wanted to show you today about StreamNative Cloud. We hope you really like it. We hope you really get a chance to use it and to try it out. Thanks, and that'll be it for me today.